Why do we live? In today's society that's inundated with materialistic messages, many young people could give an answer such as to buy a Lamborghini or to be able to live in a penthouse. But the thing is, on our deathbeds, none of us will say, I wish I could have been able to buy and drive the Bugatti while I was alive.
What color is your Bugatti?
Or, I wish I could have been able to buy that apartment in the Porsche Design Tower Miami and be neighbors with Lionel Messi. No. On our deathbeds, our last words will always be the ones of telling our loved ones that we love them just one more time. And if given the opportunity to do just one more thing while we are still alive, it will be to have just one more meal with our loved ones, smiling and reminiscing on all of our good memories and the times we shared, not going around driving in a Lamborghini. And in this sense, this is why murderers, from whatever country they may be from, are the absolute worst of beings on earth, because they abruptly make us forever depart from our loved ones without ever having the chance to say goodbye or tell them that we love them for the one last time. Hence, for any murderer who gets arrested, we obviously want them to tremble in fear for the type of punishment that they're going to receive. I mean, they have committed the most egregious act that a human being can do to another human being, and the very least that we should be able to expect from the nation's justice system is that they be punished to the tantamount severity. But that is not the case in South Korea. Just a few weeks ago on September 26, 2024, in the city of Suncheon, South Korea, a man by the name of Park Daesung silently followed Miss Nam, still only a high schooler at the time, for more than 800 meters, then stabbed her to death. Miss Nam was out at the late hour in order to purchase some medications for her ill father. Her father could never see his daughter return back home. Park Daesung and Miss Nam were complete strangers, by the way. Park Daesung was arrested by the police just a few hours later, and here is his mugshot. Yeah, we can clearly see that this is not the face of a person who has the slightest sense of remorse over the humanly indescribable act that he conducted just a few hours ago of taking away the life of an innocent girl, and is even a tiny bit afraid of the criminal punishment that he's about to receive. He even seems to have a bit of a smirk on his face as well. Just to explain briefly on who Park Daesung is and why he committed the crime, he was an ex-small restaurant owner who had to recently shut down his restaurant due to the lack of sales, forcing him to shut down his business. According to the words of his classmate back from middle school, Park showed violent tendencies all the way back from middle school, saying that Park would randomly hit him on the head for no reason and would start fights. One thing that we have to keep in mind though is that Park Daesung is a tiny human being. When we see the photo-lined video of him being held by the police, we can see that he's just objectively a small individual, with him being estimated to weigh in the 50 kilograms range or around 110 pounds. His classmate back from middle school said that he was very skinny ever since he was a kid, so made sure that he selected carefully of whom he picked the fights with and suck up to the bigger or stronger kids at school so that he does not get beat up. And he seems to have continued on with his belligerent tendencies during mandatory military service as well. According to Mr. B, who served in the military together with Park Daesung, said that he always picked fights with peers in his unit and showed his tattoos to people in his attempts to tell everyone that he is this intimidating person. Park Daesung is also confirmed to have went to military prison during his period of military service for assaulting a fellow male soldier. His military peer said that Park Daesung was actually proud of his military imprisonment for the assault, thinking that this proved that he was this badass, scary dude who could not be effed with, and boasted the experience of his military imprisonment around like a medal. His violent tendencies just continued on even after being released from the military service as well, as his acquaintance said in an interview that Park Daesung would brag and tell stories such as how he beat up a high schooler and got investigated several times by the police for physical assault. And with Park Daesung struggling financially and being overall frustrated with the closing down of his small restaurant and being under a mountain of debt, he stepped out onto the streets just after midnight on September 26, 2024 from his restaurant with a knife and went on to brutally take away the life of Miss Nam. Now, when the news of Park Daesung's murder was reported on the news, the South Korean public justifiably got absolutely enraged. And what angered the public even more was that Park Daesung, whether it be in the CCTV footage of him walking away from the crime scene, or in his mugshot, or even when coming out to the police station photo line to receive questions from the reporters, always has this punchable little smirk on his face. But then, the people in South Korea by now have recently gotten somewhat used to the murderer smiling, or at least looking quite carefree whenever they stand on the police photo line in front of the general public. On October 2nd, a South Korean 24-hour news channel, YTN, uploaded a video on their YouTube channel with the video title, "They Deserve the Death Penalty. South Korean People Enraged at Smiling Murderers." The video was basically a 11 hours 55 minutes loop of footages of recent murderers of South Korea being held in front of the police station photo line. And talking about this particular thumbnail, we already know that the murderer in the middle is Park Daesung. The one wearing glasses on the right is Choi Eun-jung. On August 17th, 2023, Choi Eun-jung attempted to assault a woman at Gwanak Mountain Park at 11:44 a.m. When the victim resisted, he beat her mercilessly with brass knuckles, which led to her tragic passing. When Choi Eun-jung appeared in public in front of the reporters, on his way to be brought over to the prosecutor's office from the police station on August 25th, 2023, he appeared looking as carefree as he could be, showing that rather happy-looking face that we see on the thumbnail. And last but not least, the murderer on the left is Chun Juan. On September 14th, 2022 at 8:56 p.m., he went inside the women's bathroom at Shindang Station in Seoul, then brutally stabbed a female station employee to the point of her passing. Although he did not give out a full-out smirk, as in the case of Park Daesung, we can still see that one side of his lip is indeed slightly heading upwards for a brief moment before he looks downwards and tries to control his facial expressions once he saw all the reporters in front of him. Now, let us first get into trying to think of the different reasons why each of these three murderers seem to have a happy, or at least unworried expressions on their faces after literally taking away the lives of innocent individuals based on the information that we have on the personal history and personality traits of these three murderers. With understanding as to why Park Daesung is smiling, it looks to be somewhat simple based on his actions in the past. From all of the testimonies from different people, such as his middle school classmate, military service peer, acquaintances, etc., he seems to always have had a complex regarding how tiny and physically weak he is, and wanted to overcompensate for this by picking fights and bullying people who are smaller or younger than him in order to hypnotize himself that he is this intimidating, scary person. The best example of this is perhaps the testimony given by his peer who spent time in military service together with Park Daesung. As we've briefly mentioned previously, after Park Daesung assaulted a fellow male soldier in the army and was sent to maximum time in military prison, rather than be ashamed by it, he was actually proud of what he has done, boasting about it to others, and thought of it as something that proved that he's this individual who's built different, who dares to do what other people can't. And we can also physically see this in the CCTV footage of Park Daesung walking away from the crime scene just seconds after fatally stabbing Miss Nam. He's just literally smiling away, as if to tell himself in relief, "You've done it, Park Daesung. Look how much of a scary gangster killer you are. You're the man." But then again, all of this is just an illusion inside his little head, as in reality, he's nothing but a small coward who can never even dream of stabbing a person his own size, as he fears that he'll get the knife taken away from him and get beat up. Thus the reason why he chose to silently walk up behind the teenage girl to commit the indescribable crime. With the case of Choi Eun-jung, we can also partly understand as to why he's walking out smiling from his personal history. During police investigation, he confessed to the police that he was a virgin who has never slept with another person even once in the 30 years of his life. He did not have a job, still lived with his parents, and spent his entire life in either his room or at a PC방 playing computer games. Not a single human being other than his parents paid any attention to him throughout the entirety of his life. Again, the only records of phone calls or messages left inside his phone when checked by the police were either with his parents or when he ordered delivery food. No one else. So when he was walking out of the police station and saw the dozens of reporters trying to get not as far away from him as possible as to what he previously experienced throughout his entire life, but as near as him as possible, and actually pay attention to him and take photos of him, not anybody else, like someone behind him or something, but him, he must have felt that this was the very first time he actually felt like a somebody throughout the whole span of his life. Thus the reason why he looks pleasantly surprised, as if to say, "Oh wow, look at all these people who gathered in order to take photos of me and ask me questions. I'm a somebody now." Now, The third murderer on the YTN News video thumbnail, Chun Juan, is again not technically full out smiling. However, we believe he was included in the particular thumbnail in that, from his facial expression, we can just tell from our senses that he's not a person who's feeling that much sorry for taking away the life of the female subway station employee. Now, if we get into the details of his case, it is one of the most infuriating things that you'll ever hear, as the South Korean justice system already had a clear chance to save the victimized female subway station employee. We'll call her Miss K from this point onwards. Chun Juan was an employee at the Seoul Metro, together with Miss K, and throughout his time working for the Seoul Metro, he obsessively stalked and took illegal photos and videos of Miss K, then went on to blackmail Miss K with the illegal videos he took of her inside the women's subway station bathroom. However, Miss K immediately called the police on October 7th, 2021, and Chun Juan was arrested by the police the next day on the October 8th. And here is when the South Korean justice system miserably failed Miss K. After arresting Chun Juan, the Seoul Seobu Police Station and the Seoul Seobu District Prosecutor's Office requested that Chun Juan be arrested and be held in custody until his trial was held. However, the Seoul Seobu District Court actually rejected this request on the grounds that Chun Juan had no risk of destroying evidence or fleeing before trial. So from October 8th, 2021, from when he was arrested, to September 14th, 2022, when his trial was scheduled to be held, he was walking about in Seoul as a free man. Let us say this again. The South Korean court rejected to hold a criminal stalker who took videos of the victim while she was inside the bathroom and blackmailed her with these illegal videos in custody until trial, leaving the victim, Miss K, in great danger until the day that the trial was held, which would be the day when Chun Juan would be given a guilty verdict and be finally taken away to prison. So for almost a year from October 8th, 2021, when Chun Juan was first arrested for the charges of stalking, illegally filming and blackmailing Miss K, to when his trial was going to be held on September 14th, 2022, Chun Juan was out in society as a free man, occasionally attending the police and prosecutorial investigations here and there from his home. And throughout his final few months, out as a free man until trial, Chun Juan carefully planned out the murder of Miss K. He meticulously checked Miss K's work schedule, and just one day before his trial was to be finally held, he snuck into the women's bathroom in Sindang Station, waited for an hour and 10 minutes until Miss K got into the bathroom and sadistically took away her life. Only if the judges at the Seoul Seobu District Court accepted the request made by the Seoul Seobu District Prosecutor's Office to hold Chun Juan in custody until trial, Miss K would be still alive with us at this point. So Chun Juan's facial expression, we believe, is essentially a one of relief. He has completed his mission. He made sure that Miss K, who did not return his love, suffered from one of the most physically and psychologically painful experience in which a human being can undergo, of being brutally stabbed to the point that all your organs get destroyed and your heart eventually stops beating. And in those last moments, when her consciousness was still attached, make her suffer from the pain of knowing that she'll never be able to see her beloved family ever again. And he knows that in South Korea, with the nation's extremely lenient prison system, he's not going to undergo any form of physical pain during his time in prison. Some degree of psychological pain, sure. He may suffer from the mental pain that comes from being confined in a small space for prolonged periods of time, or the psychological pain that may stem from boredom, but he's most likely not going to get any beating while incarcerated, as such is extremely rare in South Korean prisons. The type of fear that we see from the ex-convicts in the US of never wanting to go back to prison from the traumatizing experience they had in there simply does not exist in the case of South Korea. Inmates get to sleep 9 hours a day, get given 3 meals a day, time to exercise, read books, etc., with any type of physical violence from the prison officers being strictly prohibited. And Chun Juan knows all of this, as from so much news coverage and confessions from ex-convicts on the media and social platforms, most South Koreans at this point just know how good the life is in a South Korean prison. So knowing that he's not going to receive even remotely close to the level of physical and psychological pain in which Miss K suffered from his hands, he's probably feeling relieved, thinking that hey, it's not going to be all that bad. Needless to say, South Koreans, including Helen and I, absolutely detest seeing these smug, carefree faces given out by these murderers after they took away innocent lives in the most excruciating ways. Chun-jong and Chun-juan both received lifetime sentences, and Park Daesung, while his sentence has not been out yet, as his trial is yet to be held, is most likely going to be given a lifetime sentence in a few months' time by the South Korean court, as in the case of Chun-jong and Chun-juan. But then, most South Koreans do not think that a lifetime sentence for these murderers is enough. There is a rising public voice in South Korea that is calling for the sentence of death penalty to be given to these most heinous criminals and their executions be actually carried out, both in order to achieve at least some degree of justice for the victims who had their lives taken away from them, as well as for crime prevention purposes, claiming that many of the latent murderers will refrain from taking away the lives of innocent civilians if they know that they're going to get their lives taken away from them as well, rather than knowing that they'll live a rather comfortable life in prison for their remaining time on earth before dying from natural causes. According to a survey conducted in 2023 by the South Korea Law Times, the biggest legal journal in South Korea, 79.1% of the survey participants said that they supported the death penalty, while 20.9% opposed. And by the way, capital punishment is still technically legal in South Korea, and criminals can still be given a death penalty. However, with the actual execution of a death row inmate in South Korea being all the way back on December 30th, 1997, South Korea is commonly regarded at this point as a de facto abolitionist country. So this means that as of current, there are 59 death row inmates currently alive in South Korean prisons who at this point are basically the equivalent to lifetime sentence prisoners, and executions do not seem as if they'll be carried out in South Korea anytime soon. Han Dong-un said that carrying out an execution of an inmate can be problematic for South Korea from a diplomatic standpoint.
이게 외교적인 문제도 굉장히 강력합니다. 사실 만약에 사형을 집행하게 되면 EU와의 외교 관계가 심각하게 단절될 수 있는 문제입니다.
And many experts in South Korea in the field of criminal justice, such as Seung Jae-yeon, a current police officer, as well as a researcher in the Korean Institute of Criminology and Justice, do possess their doubts on whether execution of death row inmates will have a positive effect on the crime prevention side.
자기가 사형을 집행받는다 할지라도 현재 나타나고 있는 범죄 현상은 반드시 범죄를 할 수밖에 없는 사람들 이라는 점에서 좀 더 범죄 예방적 측면을 더 강조해야 되지 않을까.
So with the very Minister of Justice of the nation, as well as many experts on the field of criminal justice, possessing their skepticism on the death penalty, the execution of murderers, such as Park Daesung, Choi Eun-jong, and Chun-juan, are not going to be held anytime soon. Now, we do not wish this video to be a one that has people arguing about whether the death penalty is good or bad, or whether South Korea in particular has to embrace capital punishment or not. However, what we do categorically agree upon as South Koreans is that prisons in South Korea has to become more of a place that is feared by both the already convicted criminals as well as the latent criminals. A very memorable comment that we have previously received from one of our subscribers in the past, Jamal, who lives in Singapore, on our video on the case of Kim Lea, the very first criminal in South Korea who was subject to a forced public mugshot reveal, was this comment. Now, we are not going to necessarily agree with Jamal on bracketing the entire population of South Korea as direct, rough, and blunt, as although South Korea does indeed have its fair share of people who are quite direct with their words.
자리 앉아.
여기 있어. 대박.
자리 앉아.
대박. 누워.
자리 앉아. 자리 앉아.
넌 누구야?
자리 앉아.
넌 누구야?
자리 앉아.
좋아요.
자리 앉아. 자리 앉아. 자리 앉아라.
너도 가볼래? 간수는 걸 먹어볼래?
Jamal most likely has his reasons for having this prejudice from his past personal experiences. We would like to respectfully point out here that putting out prejudices of people based on their race and nationality is not the most right thing to do in our approach to make the world a better place. but the other parts of his comment of how the laws in South Korea is as soft as cottons, and how in Singapore, citizens will think again before they commit a crime because the laws are harsher than human nature, we very much agree upon. If you're not mistaken, Singapore still conducts judicial caning along with the prison sentence, with the number of strokes done onto the convicted criminal increasing tantamount to the severity of the crime in which the criminal has committed. And with murder obviously being one of the most heinous crimes that a human being can conduct, we believe the number of strokes received by a murderer in Singapore will most likely be higher than almost any other criminal offender. Now, we're not saying that South Korea has to specifically adopt judicial caning per se, but if you ask us on which is better, have murderers such as Park Daesung, Choi Eun-jong, and Chun Ju-wan, who stabbed or brass-knuckled innocent individuals to their most painful death and are still out there sparking, receive some caning or do not receive caning, we would resoundingly say that them being caned is more in line with achieving justice for the deceased victims. Getting their asses whipped is still not even 1/1000th to the degree of pain that they provided onto the victims and their families. And as Jamal have stated, such harsher judicial system will make some of the latent criminals to indeed think again before they commit a crime. For instance, we believe at least for the case of Park Daesung, a form of corporal punishment such as judicial caning being implemented in the South Korean justice system could have very much possibly prevented him from taking away the life of the victim Miss Nam. This is as from his past actions. We know that Park Daesung is still selective on whom the targets of his violence are, as he does not want to get his ass whipped by people physically stronger than him and be inflicted with physical pain upon himself. We hear this from his middle school classmate, who said that Park Daesung only picked fights with and beat up kids who are smaller than him while being obedient to the bigger boys, or how on the night of his crime, out of anyone he could have chose to stab, he specifically chose the rare female high schooler on the street to commit his murder, rather than an average male walking on the street who could again just take the knife away from his short and skinny arms and inflict physical pain on him. So knowing Park Daesung's nature, if judicial caning as done in Singapore was also practiced in South Korea, he could have very much thought again before taking away the life of an innocent individual such as Miss Nam, as he knows that his frail frame will indeed suffer more than quite a bit from the caning. But for the case of Choi Eun-jong, we cannot say for sure of whether judicial caning would have had a preventative effect on him, as it does seem in many ways that he was a desperate, involuntarily celibate man who lost his common sense at that point and just wanted to do whatever necessary for him to have at least one experience of physical activity with the person of the opposite gender. As in, during the police investigation, he really did seem as if he gave no F's in life at that point. When asked by the police on why he fatally punched the victim with brass knuckles on to the point of her passing, he literally just said, "I wanted to R her." So for beings such as Choi Eun-jong, who seem like they have lost all common sense and is fixated upon one goal and is even willing to end another person's very life to get this done, we might not be able to say that forms of corporal punishment such as judicial caning will have a preventative effect on such categories of criminals. But with that said, even if it's not judicial caning, the bottom line is that actions do have to be taken at this very moment by the South Korean authorities in order to make prisons in South Korea into a place that is actually feared by the criminals, rather than maintaining the image of the place that it has right now, a place that gives 3 meals a day and a place to sleep without having to get a job. Whether it be corporal punishment, make the living conditions worse in prisons, anything, something has to be done at this point. The young Miss Nam, who got her life taken away from her by Park Daesung while she was out buying medicine for her ill father, or the victim of Choi Eun-jong, an innocent and good-hearted school teacher who spent her entire life taking care of kids and a person who was loved by her family and friends, or the victim of Chun Ju-wan, a hard-working station employee who first had to endure prolonged periods of stalking and illegal filming by Chun Ju-wan, only to have her life taken away from him as the South Korean judicial system and the judge failed her by refusing to hold the clearly dangerous Chun Ju-wan in judicial custody until trial, did not deserve to die. May the victims rest in peace, and let us hope that South Korea finds a better way to both prevent the potential murderers from committing their unspeakable crimes onto the victims, as well as find better ways to actually somewhat punish the murderers so that the deceased victims can at least achieve some small extent of justice, rather than for them to see their killers walk out of the police station with smirks on their faces.